Over in the DC universe, when father and son went to war in the pages of Batman versus Robin, we saw a really kind of climactic fight between the duo. But on Lazarus Island, where the fight took place, all of a sudden a mysterious volcano erupted and caused Lazarus resin to spread throughout the DC universe. This resin is causing some familiar characters to gain new powers. My name is Arakko Braddock, and today let's go ahead and dive deep into DC's brand new Lazarus Planet one-shot, Lazarus Planet We Once Were Gone's #1. But before we get deeper into the video, I want to go ahead and encourage you to consider subscribing to the channel and be sure to hit the like button if you enjoy our video. And I want to start things off by introducing some additional context for DC's Lazarus Planet storyline by reading their solicitation text for this one-shot issue. As the Lazarus rain beats down upon planet Earth, human beings are only a fraction of those affected by this transformative upheaval. Enter We Once Were Gods. This series of vignettes explores Lazarus Planet's effects across the many extraordinary locations and creatures in the DC universe. And, like their human counterparts, these beings are in for some big changes. Can Themyscira survive the resurrection of every invading army that has ever graced its shores? Will Martian Manhunter survive a psychic link to a doomsday nest? What happens when the monsters from the trench gain the ability to breathe air? And look out, Shazam family, the Rock of Eternity is about to get rocked. All right, so as you can see here, there is a massive amount of stories and plot threads that are being touched upon over in the collection. I want to start things off with this first storyline in the issue called Hunger Pains. This one is both written and drawn by creator Francis Manapul, and we have letters from Andworld Design. So the cover for Lazarus Planet We Once Were Gone's is illustrated by David Marquez and Alejandro Sanchez. Here's a look at their gorgeous cover for the issue. I love how David Marquez is like very confidently kind of using these like homage like movie poster covers where the composition is kind of so tight and so many themes of the issue are explored like through these covers alone. I really like how nearly kind of every story that's included in this collection is referenced, right there on the cover for the issue. And next up, let's go ahead and take a look at some of these variant covers and the interior art for the issue. Quick thanks to Adventures in Poor Taste for posting this preview so fast. And I want to go ahead and dive into this Hunger Pains story here that we're taking a look at. This one was a really intriguing story that fleshed out an interesting part of Aquaman's backstory that I haven't seen utilized in quite this time. And I think this kind of Lazarus resin twist that kind of, illustrates this new Aquaman, villain in a totally different light here. I really enjoyed kind of like the opening for this sequence as we see kind of like a family get introduced to kind of various aspects of the DC universe. Opening this story this way was really intriguing to me because I actually had no idea that this was an Aquaman story until I got a little bit deeper into the issue, and then figuring out what kind of narrative beats Francis Manapul pulls out to kind of invert in this issue is another really kind of joyous part of the comic book. I don't really want to say much more than that about the story because I don't want to give it away. If you're a big Aquaman fan and you like a lot of those seminal stories featuring the character, there's a good chance you may know the character that they're inverting or the villain from Aquaman's past that they're kind of changing here. Francis Manapul's art is just so kind of like painterly and expressive for these characters. I love the way he kind of lays out each of the individual, panels on the page and actually tells the story in Lazarus Planet. I'm kind of loving like all these really tense, facial expressions as well throughout the issue. Really enjoyed, several aspects of this story. The only kind of detractor, I think, is that this is a little bit thin because by the time the premise of the issue is introduced, it's already over. So There's an interesting start to a story here, and I hope that maybe in future issues of Aquaman that this is, directly referenced so that, we can kind of get the next aspect of this story. I really hope this isn't the last we hear of Aquaman's villain. And I want to go ahead and take a look at the next story in the issue. This one is called Songs of Pain. It's written by Dan Watters, illustrated by Max Dunbar, colored by Romulo Fajardo Jr., and lettered by Troy Peteri. So this second story in the collection, featuring Martian Manhunter, really spoke to me on a deep level. First off, I really enjoy Dan Watters from Sword of Azrael, but I really like the narration that Watters used to flesh out the Martian Manhunter character. There is just so much kind of like pathos and emotion in this story. It reminded me of the kind of Power Girl and Omen story as well that we saw in recent Lazarus Planet issues, due to the way that there's kind of like a new power being introduced to an existing character, and kind of like watching the character, attempt to come to grips with this power is very interesting. One of my favorite parts about this particular issue is watching Martian Manhunter react to just everyday people and just kind of seeing the goodness of people as well as kind of like, the bad. But again, just all of the narration throughout the issue really introduced so many kind of fascinating themes. And even though this story is just so heady and out there, I think the way that Dan Watters, writes a Martian Manhunter that's so kind of in touch with his emotions will definitely spark a little bit of interest. The art from Max Dunbar, I don't think lives up to Dan Watters' script in every occasion. I think there's a couple instances where Dunbar's art kind of doesn't capture all of the more nuanced emotions and just kind of goes for the shock value on the page. Dan Watters is such a complicated writer that I'm not sure, this creative team was the right choice from DC on this particular issue, but I still had an absolute blast with this story. And the next story in the collection is called Song of the Dead. This one is written by Phillip Kennedy Johnson, illustrated by Jack Herbert, colored by Alex Guimaraes, and lettered by Pat Brosseau. So the Song of the Dead story was just such a kind of cool way to go back to Themyscira and take a look at, how Themyscira is changing because of all of the, recent Amazons like, Nubia becoming queen. So really fantastic to see all those kind of new like status quo elements that are being kind of taken from various aspects of Becky Cloonan and Michael Conrad's Wonder Woman run. And just kind of watching all these characters come to their, natural conclusion and, start fighting in the pages of Lazarus Planet is very interesting. One of the aspects that I really enjoy about this particular story is I can tell that it is setting up the Lazarus Planet kind of Revenge of the God story, as well as the next title in the collection. And I'm really curious to see kind of where this goes and how the plot threads are picked up on in that issue. I'm very much so looking forward to just where Lazarus Planet is heading next. And the next story I want to go ahead and talk about is called The Price of Eternity. This one is written by Josie Campbell, illustrated by Caitlin Yarsky, colored by Jordie Bellaire, and lettered by Clayton Cowles. This story was among my favorites in the collection, along with the Songs of Pain story. I just love kind of the combination of characters, with Malik White returning as Bolt in this issue, alongside Mary Bromfeld as Shazam as well. This is a really unlikely kind of new generation of DC characters teaming up together, and watching them both get in some hijinks together is the most cathartic stories in the collection, at least for me. Just it's so interesting to kind of get the new era of DC fleshed out here. Also, I really like how this storyline captures a key plot point from the new champion of Shazam and actually resolves it in full. So I'm really happy that Josie Campbell got the opportunity to almost like continue the new champion of Shazam, but not really in this story. I'm glad that Lazarus Planet is giving, really strong DC creators a chance to maybe finish stories that they wouldn't have had the opportunity to do so otherwise. I think that's great. And also, one of the aspects about this story that really captured my attention was how well Malik White was playing in kind of like a team based setting. I really like how Josie Campbell uses Malik White's kind of pre med, med student. Occupation to kind of weigh him down, just like Christopher Priest does over in the pages of Black Adam. I really like kind of like the humor that Josie Campbell imbued into Malik as well. And I'm glad that so many aspects of his character are kind of carrying over from that Black Adam series when I was afraid that they wouldn't, because it's just such a nuanced tone in that title. And you wouldn't think that DC would be able to capture it every time, but I think they've pretty much done so in this story. So over in the final page of the issue, we get another kind of tease, encouraging readers to head over to Lazarus Planet Revenge of the Gods. And I have to say, there's so many intriguing kind of story plot threads that are opened up in this issue. I can't wait to follow some of these stories again and kind of see how DC is able to continue Lazarus Planet, after we're done with this initial wave of one-shots in this Revenge of the Gods story. I think it's such an intriguing kind of future to the DC universe. So I bet nobody's surprised, but that's another great issue of Lazarus Planet. Each of these one-shots have had so much interesting continuity, and I think DC has done a particularly great job charting the character arc for so many of their characters across these stories. I think they all seem incredibly cohesive and bring out interesting parts of the DC universe. I want to know from you, did you enjoy Lazarus Planet, We Once Were Gods #1? What were your thoughts on the issue? And did you enjoy the story with Malik and Mary as much as I did? Thank you guys so much for checking out the video. We'll be back really soon for more excellent comic book content, and I hope to see you in the next one. All right, we'll see you soon. Bye.